All right. Howdy, everyone. Before we get going, I want to let you know that we are still trying to make some improvements with the live stream here. It's just something new that we're doing, so bear with us as we're trying to get some better quality video, audio, get some good things going. So hoping we can keep doing these on a regular basis and just have a lot of fun with it, get some good information out there, and get some questions answered from you guys. So I want to go over a couple things real quick. This is streaming on YouTube. So since it's streaming on YouTube, you can leave some comments in the chat box on there. So let us know any questions you have, any comments. We'll have a Q&A session here at the end of the live stream. Otherwise, we're going to jump into it. So for anyone that this is the first time that you've attended one of our boot camps, I want to talk a little bit about what the QMS boot camp is, how it got started, and what we're doing with these live streams. So the QMS boot camp evolved from trying to teach these quality management principles to department leaders, to quality managers, executives, supervisors, the folks that are actually doing the work on a daily basis. And the problem we ran into is that the courses that are available primarily are auditor courses, Six Sigma, project management. They're fairly technical in nature and fairly narrow in the subject that they cover. So we developed the QMS Bootcamp to really be the one course that it just doesn't exist in the market, how to actually implement, maintain, and integrate your management system with the rest of your organization. So today's course is the first session. There are 4 sessions in this course for implementing a quality management system. We're going to be putting the vast majority of our QMS Bootcamp online for you. We do offer some in-person versions of the training. So if you're trying to get a quality management program going for your team, you really need some in-person help and support, we'll be there for you with it. Also, with our remote quality management services and our quality assurance monthly, so many hours per month for the QMS Bootcamp are included with those services as well. So if we're going to be working with you to build and implement your management system, we're going to be there to helping train and get the system integrated with your team and make sure that it's a fully functional part of your management system and not just some odd add-on that creates more paperwork. That's the last thing we want, is a system that just creates more paperwork for your team. So let me find my clicker here. Oh, sorry. Again, getting new to the live stream here. So today we're doing session 1 for implementing a quality management system. Session 1, we're going to be talking about must-haves, kind of using the analogy of filling your toolbox. So what's necessary to fill your toolbox, and how do we make a plan for the implementation of our quality management system? Now, we'll be scheduling over the next few weeks, session 2, 3, and 4, and these go into a lot more detail about the process approach, utilizing the PDCA cycle, which we spoke about briefly in some earlier course material, but we're going to really be getting into detail with it. Session 3, my absolute favorite, especially if you're a fan of the Quality Matters podcast, is process mapping. Process mapping is a huge component in the development of a quality management system. And then session 4, we're going to really get into the nitty-gritty details of what it's like to implement that system. But today, we're going to start with filling our toolbox. So when we talk about quality management system, I would like to make clear, and we'll go ahead and jot this down for you, that we are talking about, in quotes, a quality management system. The idea of quality being in quotes here is pretty simple. If you look up the definition of what quality is, it's to have a high value, a high end result. So we're looking for a high quality management system. So with that being the understanding of a quality management system, that means that our quality management system can run our health and safety program, our environmental management program, medical devices, oil and gas production, service provision. you name it, we're going to be able to hit the gamut across the board with the same skills, effectively the same toolbox for regardless where you're at. So if you're dealing with sector and you're like, well, we're really not all about the quality assurance piece. That's not quite what we're going for here. We're looking more at the occupational health and safety, or maybe even an ESG implementation. These tools are still going to work and they're going to help you get to where you need to go. So first part of this is we're going to be talking about certified versus compliant. So we got to set some goals. So then we want to identify, well, when are we wanting to get this completed? Why do we want to complete this process? You know, it's one thing to say, hey, we want to get ISO 9001 certified. Great. Why do you want to do it? Could be that, and we're seeing all of this right now. It could be that you want to get the ISO 9001 certified because you realize the cost savings that comes in with it. You realize the process improvement. You know, we've got some folks we're talking to right now where the owner's looking at retiring soon, and he wants to ensure that when he retires and leaves the company, that all of the processes are very firmly and very well established so that he can have a good, succession plan moving out. Other folks have started to see the immense value that exists with marketability. So if you're a member of sales development team, let me tell you, ISO 9001, API Q1, ISO 45001, any one of these standards attached to your name and they're on the website and they're with your product and service information goes a very long ways, especially in this weird post-COVID economic crash, whatever you want to call it, this weird post-2020 economy that we're in. Marketability is becoming a very, very large issue. There's unfortunately just less work to go around, but there's also a lot more competition for that work. So if you want to be sure that you can get the work and you can maintain a profitable, successful business, these certifications are really a great way to go because the certification itself gets you the marketability, but the process of getting there, the improvements you make, the continual improvement processes, reductions in waste, these are absolutely huge. But we want to identify why your organization cares the most about it, that way we know the expected outputs that we're going to get. So I'm talking about the expected outputs. We'll get more into that in the process mapping session here in a few weeks, but we need to know our expected outputs of the process at the beginning or we can't plan properly. Another thing is we talk about certified versus compliant. Like what's the difference? What's certified? What's compliant? So let's take a look there. So if I'm certified, that means that we have conducted an internal audit ourselves. We have had a third-party certification body come out and assess us. We have had several checks against our management system to ensure that we are ready to go, that we have the necessary processes in place. Whereas compliant, you'll find a lot of folks say that they're compliant to a standard. And in and of itself, outside of the marketability or customer requirements, there's nothing to say that being compliant isn't good enough. So what compliant would mean is you would bring in a consultant or an internal auditor or even conduct your own self-assessment to identify that you've met all of the requirements of the standard. But here's the thing, and why I encourage folks to go forward with the process of certification, even though there is the added cost from the certification body, is you're doing 90%, 95% of the work to get to the point where you can call yourself compliant, but you get none of the benefit of the added marketability. And again, I really want to stress and emphasize that marketability we are seeing right now is huge in this post-2020 environment. So I definitely encourage you to move forward with certification. But here's an example when staying compliant and not going to the third party, it can be an acceptable alternative. So let's say that you're trying to do an integrated system. So we're looking at 9001 for quality management, quality assurance. We're looking at 45001 here for occupational health and safety. We've got 14001 over here for our environmental compliance. And we're certified to 9001. Well, the structure of 9001 and 45001 and 14001 and even the structure of API Q1 are all very, very similar with many of the same requirements. So if you're certified to one and you're looking for the internal benefit from the others, compliance is a great solution. But if you're looking for that added marketability and you're looking to ensure that you can stay on top of it, you get some additional accountability from that third party body, definitely certification is a way to go. As a warning to folks, there are a ton. It's really sad and shameful how many folks are out there that provide the consultation support and offer a certification service for you. Now, we've got a separate quality minute where I've gone into more detail on this, but a certification body, there's need to have their credentials, their accreditation from an even higher body. Now, we won't get into too much detail here, but when you're looking at a certification body, very much try to avoid organizations that are fairly small, fairly local. You do want to go to oftentimes a larger outfit. You want to make sure that they have their proper accreditation, such as ANAB accreditation. And we can talk more about that in a one-on-one sessions, but definitely something to keep an eye out for. The very first time I tried to go for ISO 9001 certification with a company I worked for previously, we were talking to a consultant, and their organization also provided these certification services at half the price for half the days of an external audit. It sounded fantastic, except when we asked for their credentials, they were absolutely, completely fake, bogus, nothing real about it at all. Any certification we'd received from these people would have been worth less than the paper it was printed on. But kind of digress a little bit off of the topic here, but very, very important things. You want to know when you intend to achieve your compliance or certification to the standard. So the when is very important. It's pretty common that folks will call us and ask, well, hey, we want to get certified. We want to do it in I've had people ask for 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. And depending on the level of compliance you already had beforehand, could make some of those a little more realistic. But generally speaking, if you're starting from midstream or starting from the ground up, you're probably looking anywhere from 6 to 12 months to get ready for your internal audit. Once you conduct the internal audit, we've got about a month to resolve any issues lingering from that. Then we move into the certification audit, which begins with a stage 1 audit, usually a day or two. And they're kind of looking at paperwork issues and, are you good enough to move forward with certification? And then the stage 2 audit will probably be 3 or 4 days. And that whole process can take a couple of months. So just in the auditing, just from your internal audit to getting your third-party certificate can easily be a 3 or 4 month period of time as well. So it's real important to think about the timeline of events and how you're going to move forward with this. But some of the very first things that we have to have in place, regardless again if it's quality assurance, health, safety, environmental, oil and gas, manufacturing, service, doesn't matter, is you need to identify what you do. What are the products and services you provide? Let's get a little detailed about it. Where do you perform these services? Are these performed on site for a client? Do you do field service over here? Are they performed at your shop? Do you outsource so much of the operations to suppliers and so forth? Very, very important things to identify because these are going to be crucial inputs into developing that management system. Who do you service? Are you a business to consumer, business to business? If you're business to business, are you business to business with similar folks to you? Are you working with some of the super majors in the oil and gas world? Who are you serving? By identifying very well who your customers are and even breaking it out into the bulk. 75% of our work's here, 20% is over here. We've got this little 5% of folks over here that are maybe sometimes a little squirrely or oddball. Reason that's important is if you have a group that's kind of a little squirrely, oddball, you just do the work to take care of some existing clients, and maybe it's not part of your core offering, you can actually exclude that in your ISO certification and your ISO scope, especially if it's oftentimes one-off and kind of oddball projects. So these things are really important to consider as well. Who's going to be impacted by the work you do? We've talked about interested parties. My gosh, this just cannot be overemphasized of the importance. And especially now as we're moving more towards this environment where we care about environmental sustainability and governance issues. We care more about health and safety we're having on the people in our company. Really dig into who's impacted by your organization. Where does your waste go? When you throw something away, where's it go? Is this going to a traditional landfill? Do you have any hazardous waste? How are those being handled? Even a quality assurance program. These things are very important to understand. So really kind of dig into these type issues. Do you work in and around various neighborhoods? What are the legal compliances that you have? What are the state regulations that you have? Something even as simple as putting a sign up. We had a client once who got in trouble for having a sign out there, and the city, issued all sorts of fines. Does this directly affect their quality management program? No, but when your customers can't see your sign because the city told you to take it down because you didn't have the proper permits for it, everything kind of impacts one another. So then we want to start thinking about how do these various processes that we have interact? How do the different locations we have, the integrations of our suppliers? So really just start making lists of these things. Fill out tons of chart paper with these ideas on it. They will come in very useful later, and we're going to get to how that occurs. So we need to identify the standard that we care about. What standard are you looking to get certified to? What's the goal here? So for simplicity's sake, in this demonstration here, we're going to use ISO 9001 predominantly, but please understand that by slightly changing the focus, this could easily be 45,001 for health and safety, 14,001 for environment, and so on. So the need for these integrated systems is really huge these days. So do consider, as you move through it, integrating multiple requirements together, but we are going to primarily talk about 9001 here. So if you're listening, again, to the Quality Matters podcast, you have heard us talk many times over about the importance of leadership commitment in your organization. So who's the management team? They need to be committed to this. But I'm going to bet if you're watching this, you're either a small business owner or you're a member of middle management. So if you're a member of middle management and you have to sell this to your upper management, it's kind of hard to do. You can't really knock on your boss's door and say, hey, boss, really need to make sure that you're committed to this ISO 9001 initiative that we're putting forward. Because if not, it's just going to fail miserably and be a flop. If you're the small business owner, it's even kind of hard to have that conversation with yourself. You're doing this for other reasons. Well, everyone's in sales. You've probably heard that before. Everyone's in sales. I don't care what it is you're doing. Everyone's in sales, and you're selling yourself, you're selling your ideas, you're selling your values all the time. So we really need to think about, again, what are we going to gain out of this process? Then we need to start thinking about, okay, so once the top management is on board with this, what about the rest of our leadership team, supervisors, foremen, night shift supervisors, even just that one welder that's been here for 30 years and everyone respects his opinion. Let's make sure that we get these folks on board, and telling them that we're implementing ISO 9001 and we're super excited to do this is the worst way to do it. I don't think anyone that's not in the quality management world already is going to say, woohoo, ISO 9001, let's write some procedures. And yeah, it just doesn't have that exciting ring to it. It should, but oftentimes it doesn't. So we'll talk a little bit about how you can sell that. But one of the first things you'll have to do once you sell the idea of going for certification, and maybe even before you even try, is to define the scope and the context or the organization. We've already talked about context of the organization in some previous lessons here, so we won't dig into that too far. But you got to know who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing it, all of these various deals. So let's go back real quick before we jump in there. So you want to identify the scope of the management system. That scope is going to involve many things, not just is this for the QA, the health and safety, OH&S, but this is also going to identify any departments that are or are not included in the scope. So especially for organizations that have multiple locations, it is very common to implement these changes in one location, test it out, get a chance to kind of grow and build that culture. That actually takes longer than the implementation of the processes themselves, and then extend it out to the rest of the organization. And updating your scope is perfectly acceptable. And when you do, you need to let your certifying body know we have updated the scope of our certification and would like you to Review this at your next audit so that we can get it added to the official paperwork. So planning, PDCA cycles, we talked about last time. Planning is absolutely crucial. We have to plan any process that we're going to undertake. So there's a lot of pieces that go into this. So we want to identify the plan for the entire deployment of our management system. I promise we're not going into each of these bullet points in a detail in our chat right now. Okay, let me flip over here. I can read the paper in my hand a little bit better than the screen across the room. So one of the first things you're going to want to undertake is your own personal gap assessment of the organization. The gap assessment can be done by you, can be conducted by someone like Texas Quality Assurance or any other consultant or provider that you have. But one of the things that we really emphasize with the gap assessments is these should not be 200-300 question questionnaires. These should really be taken on from the aspect of a process map, from looking at risk assessments, and then assessing the gaps of the current processes to the requirements of the ISO 9001 or other standard. Now, once we get into the process mapping lesson, this will make a little bit more sense. But if you've got someone offering to conduct a gap assessment for you, and the first thing they do is hand you this multi-page questionnaire or sit down over the course of a few days to go through this questionnaire, run away. Those questionnaires are built with certain biases in place of how that consultant, that organization believes your organization should function. And they might be correct on 80% of it, but that 20%, that might be your secret sauce. That might be what's allowing you to be more agile, respond more quickly to customer requirements, improve more, and do so much more than the rest of your competition. So we don't want to get hammered down to a certain way of operating. It's just absolutely a recipe for disaster. And when I say disaster, what you're going to run into is what a lot of people hear when you say ISO 9001. They think too many processes, too many procedures, too much paperwork, can't change anything. It's chiseled in stone. You don't want that. You want to be able to maintain your agility, to improve and to grow your business and adapt as conditions change. So gap assessment, very, very key, crucial piece. Next, as you go through consultation phase, again, whether that's with someone like Texas Quality Assurance, on your own, doing your own internal consultation and development work, we got to start with documentation development. So as we go through the gap assessment and we go through the process mapping, which again, we're going to detail later on, we're going to identify, well, hey, we really need procedures written here. We need forms here. We need handoffs here. So you want to make sure that you get a start on that documented information. Even if all it is just making yourself a list. Here's procedures I need. Here's forms I'm going to need. Here's when paperwork changes hands. Those are always really, really good opportunities for improvement. Competence assessment. Who needs trained? What do they need trained on? Why do they need training on it? You know, maybe not every single one of your process procedures requires documented training. Maybe for you it does. Maybe you've got a lot of health and safety trainings that are conducted internally and some are conducted externally through, other organizations. Who knows? And you need to sit down and detail it and identify it, because the competence and training is a huge piece of the support processes and a huge piece of leadership commitment. So I want to make sure those get documented as well. Then what you're going to do is you're going to revise. You're going to revise the document information. You're going to revise those competence requirements. You're going to revise everything. You're going to reapprove it. You're going to re-update it. And that is fantastic. You should not get to your internal audit or your certification audit with all your procedures still in Rev 1. If you get there with everything on Rev 1, you've missed some necessary steps, because I have yet to see anyone that gets it right the first time. So even organizations that have been operating for decades with a well-proven system, it just takes a little bit of effort sometimes to get it right, to work out the bugs, and to make a simple solution for complex problems. I got to tell you, that is the single hardest part of this entire process, is identifying simple solutions to complex problems. So let's assume we've gone through the whole consultation phase. We are ready to go. Now what we need is an internal audit. there's various parts to an internal audit. If you've never been through an internal audit, I'll give you a little bit of an update on it. If you have been through it before, it's just a refresher for you. So internal audit, you have to have an internal audit plan. What departments, what processes primarily is your auditor going to assess? Let's get a general outline of the time of day of when they'll be there. And let's go through all of these details. So if you would like, I can send you some information that we have on how many days to use to estimate for your internal audit, depending upon what we call our effective employee count. So it's not your total employee count, it's your effective employee total count. So what that means is we're taking a certain percentage of our supervisors, our management, our line employees, and coming up with a total number of effective employees. And depending on the number of effective employees, we'll determine how many days on average we need for the internal audit. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know. I'll be more than happy to send that over to you. But we want the audit schedule. We want to identify the audit team. This is one of the biggest benefits of outsourcing an internal audit to someone like Texas Quality Assurance, but isn't the only way to do it. Is with an outsourced internal audit, objectivity is very easy to manage and maintain. So let me give you some advice here, though. Is if you have a consultant doing the bulk of the consulting, it is hard to maintain objectivity during that internal audit. So it is best to have a separate internal auditor auditing versus the individual that consulted with you. And if this is a completely internal audit, it can be tough for a small business. The first time I did an internal audit, we self-audited for a company I worked for before. We had about 100 employees at the time, and I had to train 5 auditors to be on our audit team. And so what that meant is that each of us audited different processes within the organization that we ourselves did not personally work on or attend to. Since I had developed virtually every single process procedure, I'd written everything, I'd have been involved in the entire process, I actually didn't do very much auditing that week. I had the rest of the team do the auditing for me. And so sometimes that objectivity can be hard because you don't want someone auditing a process that they manage or that they developed directly. But there's a number of ways that this can be accomplished. Once the audit is completed, you will have a number of findings. So findings are based on what we call objective evidence, meaning objective evidence, you have to have some form of documentation, whether it's in the results of an interview, documents that were reviewed, documents that could not be reviewed, any sort of objective evidence. And these are going to fall into a few categories. We're going to have our minor nonconformities, which mean this needs to be fixed, but we have a functional system and the process is accounted for. We just need to make some improvements. Then you have a major nonconformity. Major nonconformities effectively mean that either there's a section of the standard that we simply did not address or hardly addressed at all, and it's still a gap that has yet to be filled, all the way from the initial gap assessment. Or we've identified a problem that has immediate legal consequences or immediate customer satisfaction consequences that could be detrimental to the organization. And then we have what are called observations. Observations are a funny one. We don't want too many observations. Your internal auditor should not be consulting. So those observations are, hey, we've seen other folks do it this way and you're doing it that way. Maybe you want to think about it. Maybe you don't. But if you've got an internal audit that's full of observations, we might have a little bit of a problem there. The next piece is the management review. Management review has a lot of inputs into the management review. But the primary input is the results of the internal audit. So the management review does need to be conducted by the entire management team and should be conducted within a month of completion of the internal audit and has to be conducted prior to your certification audit. And that's where we have the stage 1, stage 2 audit, and then the annual recertification audit. So on general, you'll have an auditor out on an annual basis. Sometimes with different standards and certification bodies, it varies, but it's generally also on a 3-year cycle. So you'll have the stage 1 and stage 2 on year 1. You have a surveillance audit on year 2. You'll have a surveillance audit on year 3. And then the 4th year, you'll go through a full cycle audit. So those surveillance audits, they may look at your corrective action process on year 2, and they may look at your non-conforming processes on year 3. So basically, they're looking at kind of breaking the audit up over the course of 2 years. So these things kind of change and sometimes a little difficult to get your head around. But in general, you're going to be audited internally every year, externally every year, and every 3 years, you're going to go through a big audit. But this whole process from gap assessment all the way to our certification audit, you need to know how much time you have to get that done, especially if you've got customer requirements to be certified or lose business. And we've had that happen before. So clients would call us and say, hey, look, we have to have this in place in 6 months or we're in trouble. These things are very important to know because that last 2 boxes there could take 3 months to get completed. So very, very important to identify that schedule. Now, you see here that I have in the circle here, the ISO system. Don't, for crying out loud, don't refer to this as the ISO system. Just my own personal anecdotal information. There's nothing from a procedure or requirement that says you can't call it the ISO system. But what we call things, the word choice we have matters greatly. So if you're trying to sell this idea to your organization and you're calling it the ISO system, nothing about the ISO system talks about, conveys to the average person quality, conveys the need of documentation, conveys the need for continual improvement, conveys the need of leadership integration. The ISO system, what that conveys to your average employee is a lot of documentation, a lot of people tell me how to do my job, and I don't want to be a part of it. So as you're moving forward with this, sometimes it's actually fun to have code names for the project. We're actually looking internally, taking on some certifications here over the next year. And so we're talking about putting a code name for these in place. Just something to liven it, make it feel a little bit better. And even if you don't do that, and all you do is call it our quality management system, our health and safety management system, that conveys more than the ISO system. And I will say this, we've done work with a lot of organizations, and I have not met one that called it the ISO system that had a flexible system. So there really is something into the what you call it and the name that you work with here. So what we want to do, some of the must-haves for this process is, and this is starting here in the first half of the schedule we looked at before. So what we're talking about right now, this is in the first half, the gap assessment consultation phase here. You want to document a plan according to the steps that we just looked at. So you want to communicate the plan. So even before we go through and developing all the procedures, we go through developing the work instructions, we go developing the technical specifications and how we're going to check against these. You want to communicate your plan. You know, listening to Dave Ramsey, the EntreLeadership, he talks about how if you want a plan to succeed, it needs to be communicated 21 times before it's implemented. So long before you start implementing the program, we have to talk about it, have to talk about it. You definitely want to get folks' input into it. If they hate the idea of implementing a management system, go get a cup of coffee with them. Understand why they hate it so much. Very, very, very important to think about. So you must be willing and ready to change dates on the implementation. Because I'll tell you right now, no matter how many times you've done this, you will take a look at it and you'll realize, well, we thought it would take 2 weeks to get our design and development program implemented, for example. And that actually took 6 weeks. So you need to be able to shift and adjust. My advice to you is you have a monthly schedule and you have a goal for every single month or multiple goals for every single month that you want to attain. If you go to our website, texasqualityassurance.com, we actually have a sample personal goals sheet on there. Very easily can be adapted to implementing a project such as this. So if you know you're running behind on hitting the milestones for one goal, you can then look forward and visually see the impact that this is going to have down the road. So very, very critical, very, very important tool there. Make sure you are ready to change the dates and you're able to keep track of those goals. Then, once we know our goals, once we know our dates, and we're ready to change them, well, what do? Well, we communicate the plan again. Once we're finished communicating the plan again, we're going to communicate the plan again. So if you have daily production meetings, you've got weekly management meetings, weekly engineering meetings, whatever it is, you need to be talking about it in every single meeting. We need to communicate the plan. This is where we want to be at this time. This is when we're going to be here. These are the steps that we need to get completed. This is what we're behind on. How's that going to impact the rest of us? Got to communicate the plan and accept feedback, and especially harsh criticism. It's the hardest one of all, but especially harsh criticism. Accept it, welcome it, and even encourage it. It would be much better for folks to get their frustrations, fears, anxieties out in the first month of the implementation of a system rather than 6 months into the implementation of the system. So understand that there are a lot of folks who have been in organizations with failed management systems, and that might be where they're coming from. So definitely listen and understand and communicate the plan. So we've communicated it. Now we have to sell it. You're probably seeing a little bit of a pattern here. This plan, this idea of selling is huge and important. So you want to make sure that it's unique to your organization. Make sure that people pick up, on really what you're conveying, which is the value. You are selling the value of a management system. It's huge. We've got cost reductions. We've got simplicity with exchanges and handoffs. You know what's being done. I used to be a quality manager for a small business, and folks understood within a few months that if they were going to ask me questions, the first thing that they should be able to tell me is, Kyle, I read the procedure and I didn't see how to handle this. And if that was the way that we started that conversation, we were going to have a good day. They understood very quickly that any problem they came to me with, the first thing I was going to ask is, well, what's your procedure say? What's your work instructions say to do in this scenario? So you want to make sure that you make it personal. You'll find very quickly that you've got a lot of reduced emergency situations, reduced situations where you've got to put fires out. It's these unfortunately get to be cultural issues. So it may take time to get some of these things changed and turned around. We're going to be able to increase the confidence in doing our job effectively. It's a tough thing to do to manage a small business, medium-sized business. And oftentimes you have to wear multiple hats. So knowing how things are documented and maintained is huge. And will go a long ways towards the rest of your team conducting their job efficiently and effectively. And all these things are going to save time and energy on a daily basis. So any costs that go into the implementation of the system are more than captured on the back end. Just as we're doing our own personal research right now for our sales program. So we've been trying to target this month business development for machine shops in and around the Houston area. So if you're a machine shop in and around the Houston area, and this is from looking at about 100 organizations so far this month, is the organizations that do not have an existing management system, without exception, in our research, this doesn't mean it's absolute, just in our research, the organizations that don't have a management system in place, that don't have existing processes in place, are less than $1 million in revenue. The organizations, on the other hand, that do have management systems in place are 5 million and above. That's a large gap in there. Well, we've not yet found anyone in the middle of that gap, again, in the research that we've conducted. And I think it's really telling. These management systems go a long ways to ensuring not only productivity, but the effectiveness of folks doing their job, which will allow others to do what they do and to do it best. So it's going to make for communication much easier, especially with your customers. If you know the expected output of a process before you begin, that communication is so much easier, and you've got something better to fall back on. In the end, there will be less stress, less headaches at the office and the job site. So definitely keep these things in mind as you're trying to sell the program to your team, because building that cultural basis is about half the work of the implementation itself. So here's something that I want you to do. So I want you to take a look at the ISO standard. I want you to take a look at the scope you have for your current business. And so what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and write a sample scope of your management system. Go ahead and send it to me. I'll be more than happy to take a look at it. I'll make sure my contact information is provided in the comments, in the notes here for this YouTube video. So write a scope for your organization, send it over to me. I'll be happy to take a look at it, get you some advice on it, some pointers on it. When you do this, though, you take a look at the policies requirement of the ISO 9001 standard. Do not simply write that we are an organization that provides XYZ products and services, and we want to ensure customer satisfaction and compliance to legal and other requirements. Don't write that. Let's write something a little more specific, a little more tailored to what you do. I'll give you an example, just because it's our company, so it's the easiest one to give an example to. So Texas Quality Assurance aims to utilize quality management to save organizations time and energy through quality management, consultation, auditing, software, training, and support. So that automatically starts to narrow it down a little bit. Then we even go further, say that we do this through working with small and medium-sized businesses or smaller organizations, smaller teams to build, a better culture, and then you can continue to go on from there. So the scope of your organization should be anywhere from about 3 to maybe 6 lines. If you have specific locations that you're doing this for, and not for others, make sure that location is included in there as well. So definitely try to write the scope. Take a look at the policy requirements. Let's get something good in there, and that's going to be a good first step for you. If you have any other questions or just want to bounce some ideas off of us, you can always go to book.texasqa.com. Book a 30-minute meeting with myself or anyone else on the team. We never charge for a question, and we'll be glad to see if we can help you with that question or get you additional support if you need it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out the presentation today and open up for any questions if anyone has anything. So while I'm waiting on a couple of questions, I will be right back. All right, sorry, we've got a lot more lighting in here than we've had in the past, and well, it just gets a little hot in here with all the lighting, so I had to get a quick drink. So I'll leave this open for a few minutes. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop them in the comments section below. Otherwise, thank you very much for your time. We're going to be scheduling the next 3 boot camps in the implementing a quality management system. We'll be getting into a lot more detail in these next 3 than we did today. So be looking on LinkedIn for that additional scheduling. And thank you very much for your time here today.